Hello yet again. This video is going to talk a little bit about lists, or I guess you can say arrays in a certain sense, as far as Python is concerned. Now in Java and Python, you can declare variables and you can plug things into it. So if I need to declare, let's say I need 3 or 4 variables, well I can just say, x1 equals 5 and x2 equals 10 and x3 equals, you know, Bob. Whatever I need, I have to define a variable and then I can use it. Now, there are times where maybe I have to have a lot more than just a handful. Maybe I have to have 20 or even 10, 15, 20, 100, 1,000, a million variables I need to keep track of. Now, making a name for each one is not only going to be long. I mean, imagine having a million lines of code here. Coding wise, it's going to be a pain. Because if I want to interact with this, I have to say, well, if x1 equals 5, then do this. If x2 equals this, then do this. I have to specifically have a line that shows those particular variables. Now, to get around this, we can use things called lists or arrays, depending on your language and how you define it. And what that essentially is it's one variable and it can hold kind of a collection of things, multiple items in it. So to give you an example, I'll just call it mlist equals, and we have a little brace here, and I'm just going to go 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, like that. Now, this is a list. It has 6 items in it, and I can just simply say, print mlist, and what you should see is me printing that kind of as you see it like that. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, right? Now I could come in here and actually, there's actually a keyword mlist.append, and I can append, let's say, 13. And watch what happens when I do that. I run it, and you'll see it added 13 to the end of my list. So append allows me to add things. I'm sure you could guess what remove does. If I say remove 1 and I run it. Now notice there were 2 ones and it chose the first one to remove, the first one it found. So it didn't remove all the ones, just the one. Now an array, and actually in Python you can declare arrays. The downside to creating an array is they're not really dynamic. You say it's got 5 things in it and that's it. It's got 5 things in it. You can't make it have 6 or make it have 4. It's going to have 5 items in it regardless. Now, also, you can set this to have a bunch of numbers. I could come up here and say mlist2 equals, Bob, Jerry, like that. Oh, I gotta do that correctly. There we go. So I can just put some text in here. And then I can print it, of course. Print mlist2. And what you end up seeing is, if I run it, actually, me printing those items. Now, rule of thumb in general, if this was Java or if even Python, if we were using strictly the actual arrays, which we could import and use, it has to be one type of data going across. All of them have to be strings. All of them have to be integers or floats or whatever. But that's not necessarily the case here. I could put in 12 if I want to. I could have different things. You'll see it perfectly fine with that. Now the problem with that is if I'm making some if statements or some loops and I'm trying to do some things to these, if they're different, I may have to treat them differently. I could cause a crash if I'm not careful. So general rule of thumb is you make a list or array and you want everything in it to be the same. Everything needs to be a string. Everything needs to be an int. But it doesn't necessarily have to be. It just depends. I could say there's probably one or two cases where you would do something like this. Let's say I was dumping things out from a database or something, like an entire record going across your name, your first name, your last name, your age, your address. And I'd want to put it in all these little fields so I can maybe move it to another database. That would be an example. Although I'm not necessarily doing anything to each of the little pieces of information there, but just storing and moving it. So we got a couple of different things here. Now we can also do this. Print mlist 2, and I'm going to put a little brace here. I'm going to say 1, like that. Now mlist1, if I run this, or mlist2 1, let's take a look. Jerry gets printed. Now the reason Jerry gets printed is this. This is location 0. This is location 1. This is location 2. We do this on the same line up here. This is 0, 1, 2, I'm hitting backspace there, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when you're done with a list or an array, I can specify a location. And the first location starts at 0, and then 1, and then 2, 3, 4, 5. And then location 0, 1, 2, in this case. Now if I try to print outside of that, let's say 3. Well, there isn't a 3, right? So it's going to basically break and tell you list index out of range, index error. If you were talking about Java, it would say array index out of bounds. But it's the same thing. It means that I've created this structure that holds variables, and I'm trying to go outside of it. The example I usually give would be an apartment building. Let's say your building is G, and it has 3 floors. Each floor has rooms in it, 4 rooms, let's say. So there's a total of 12 actual apartments in this building. Someone orders a pizza. They know it's building G. They get there. Well, they need to know the specific room number, which would be what this is, this index here. Value tells you the specific room number. So if it was 304, they know it's on the 3rd floor, and it's the 4th apartment. But if it was, I don't know, 405 or something, well, there isn't a 4th floor. It doesn't exist. They brought a pizza there, and there's no one to deliver it to. That's essentially what occurs if you try to go outside the bounds here. I'll just comment that out. Not with a $sign, though. There we go. So, I can add things. I can remove things. I can print specific items, and you could also do if statements if you need to. I could say if, 0, in this case, mlist 0 is this number. Mlist 1 is that number. Now, what you can also do, and what tends to happen when you have lists, is let's just go with count equals 0, while count is less than, and I'm going to use a method which I should have mentioned earlier, actually, but len. And inside I'm going to say mlist 2, like that. Hoop. Now, len mlist 2, before we do anything, gives you the size of whatever structure you put in there, in this case, whatever list. So it's going to give you the size of this list. How many things are in here? Well, there's 3 things total, so that'll be 3. So what I'm going to do is just print mlist2, in this case, count. And I'm going to say count, I can't say plus plus, but plus equals 1. We'll add 1 to it. So count is 0. 0 is less than 3. I'm going to print mlist2 0, which should be Bob. Then I'm going to add 1 to count. It's going to become 1. 1 is less than 3. So I print mlist 1, which should be Jerry. And then we add 1 to that. Now it's 2. Same thing, 2 is less than 3. I print mlist 2, which will be 12. Now it's 3. Well, 3 is not less than 3, so this is where it stops. So I run this. Bob, Jerry, 12. It prints off the whole thing. Whenever you have lists, loops are typically almost always used. It could be a for loop, it could be a while loop. I did a while loop because it's a little easier for me to illustrate, but you kind of get the picture. And we use this to go through the entire thing. So if there's a million things up here, I can use this to just shoot down the whole list. Now I think I showed you, let's say print lin mlist, right? That should tell me that there are 6 items in there. So I should get a number 6 pop up here in the middle. There it is. So that's what this does. It just gives you the length of the array/list. And this, of course, starts at 0 and goes through my list here. So that's the rough idea of how lists typically work. Again, there are arrays, but you have to import and do some extra work. Lists function just as good, if not better in some cases, depending on what you're doing. So we'll just go over this for now. And that is it.